Hi, welcome back to the Wealth Optimization Workshops. Scott Collier, the Call Dog, back here with you. Excited to get into these topics. I know you've all been waiting for them. We've been talking a lot about protection, dealing with your non-controllables, building from the foundation up in your financial planning. We're now moving into this green section that we call controllable priorities. Going to touch first on debt reduction, because we know if we're drowning in debt, it's hard to deal with any other aspect of your financial planning. So we're going to touch on some key principles today. We know this is a very complex subject. You can't cover everything in a few minutes, but we'll cover some basics. 1090 rule, we've talked to you about that. Ideally, the goal, put 10% of your income aside to deal with all of your financial planning. Below the 90% however you want, because the 10% will take care of your future. Rome's not built in a day, we know that, so if you can't handle 10% yet, that's a goal to work towards. Maybe start with 2%, 5%, but one of the key things that we find people do is they start spending 110% of their income, drowning in debt, and if you're already to that point, then you may be at the point of a bankruptcy, a consumer proposal, needing to meet with debt counselors. So hopefully you're not there. If you're not, this 1090 rule can be a very good strategy to avoid ever having that kind of debt problem. Trust me, I get it. 5 kids, 3 stepkids, 2 grandkids, ex-spouses with support payments and the whole bit. I understand the balancing act today, but it's important to understand a few things. One thing we definitely recommend, a budget worksheet. We certainly can provide budget worksheets. There's software tools online that you can do it, but don't overcomplicate it. Don't delay budgeting yourself because you don't have the right tool. You can literally take a scrap pieces of paper, split it down the middle, and you're good to go. Right? Just literally look at what's your income, what's all the revenue sources coming in, what's all the expenses going out. So, now, if you are spending more than you're making, obviously you've got a problem, but often we find there's a big gap between actual obligations every month versus income coming in. So then the question becomes, okay, where did the difference go? So we're going to touch on that as well. Good debt versus bad debt. So concept, obviously you'd like to have no debt. However, there is debt that can be good in the sense that, especially if it's low interest debt, you can get mortgage rates and business loans and things at pretty reasonable rates nowadays if your credit's good. So those assets appreciate in value. They can actually help even generate income for you if it's rental properties, if it's a business, if it's your family farm and you're buying additional property or whatever the case might be. That can be very good debt. But even just your principal residence, your home could be a good debt. Cars that appreciate value, not so good, although you can get pretty low interest rates currently. Lines of credit can be an option to pay down some debts. Where we get very concerned, the high interest loans, and even more so the high interest credit cards, and not only at 19%, sometimes even people at like 28%, like paying astronomical credit card rates. Nowadays there's a payday loan place on every street corner that is going to lend you money at brutally high interest rates. Those are the places that you need to stay away from. One of the things that we recommend, if you are in a situation where you have minimum monthly payments, don't miss the minimums on your credit card payment or whatnot, because it'll affect your credit rating. However, start when you're paying extra, put the extra money down on the highest interest rate first. Don't be paying extra down on your mortgage at 2.9%. Meanwhile, you're paying the minimum at 19% on a credit card. So start with your highest interest rates and knock those debts off first. Don't worry about paying your mortgage off quicker if you're drowning in other debts. Sometimes we'll see people and they got a bunch of money in savings. Fantastic that you got money in savings. But don't leave it in savings at 0% growth rate while you've got a 19% debt sitting over here. Take some of that money and pay that debt off. One of the things that we're seeing in an era of need versus want, in an era of self-entitlement nowadays, people have bigger homes, bigger cars, and astronomical expenses on things like electronics and gadgets and this and that, and the kids need a cell phone when they're 13. You need to really take a look at what are true needs and what are true wants, needs, your home, your basic things like food and clothing and transportation. Life insurance is a need. People say, I can't afford it, but meanwhile they got 5 cell phones in their home. Like, you really need to prioritize, and the lifeline that people have been using, the home equity in their home, and they constantly drain their home equity over and over again because now they need granite countertops, now they need this little gadget, they need new furniture even though their old furniture's okay, and so they just, or luxury vacations constantly. You're gonna have to really go back to that budgeting. What can we afford, what do we need versus what do we want? And if there's things we want, then how are we gonna save for that? Hopefully that makes sense to you. Think about this, what do you currently spend $2 a day on? What do you currently spend $10 a day on? Right, we know there's all kinds of things that we spend a lot of money on every single day and we don't miss it. Right around these parts, Tim Hortons addictions, and $2 a day easily, right? Or even the Starbucks addiction that guys have, and they got the $5 mocha latte going on. You need to think about, do you really need 2 Timmy's or 2 Starbucks every single day? If you can afford it, by all means, go ahead and buy whatever you want with your money. But when it comes to debt reduction and people drowning in debt or struggling with debt, that's a big one. Are you eating lunch out every day for $10, $20, right? I would hang out with my buddies in the past, and we'd have, by the time you put your tip in, it's $8, $9 for a beer. You have a few beers with the boys or whatever, like, could you get together in the garage or have them over to the family room and spend a couple dollars per beer instead, or $1.50 a beer instead of $9. Okay, just some suggestions, but go back to basics and think about it, right? The reason your grandparents and people in the past didn't have all these debt issues is they didn't spend money they didn't have all the time, and society has trained us to do that. Okay, so think about those types of issues. A lot of people carrying mortgage debt, other debts into retirement now, and that becomes a concern. The other area to watch, leveraged investing. In theory, and we'll dive deeper into this in the investment component, but there can be a lot of risk to borrowing money in order to invest. In theory, it can work great, but certainly people that did the Smith maneuver and some of these advanced leveraged investment strategies in the past ended up regretting it based on some of the risks they took. And the regulators are very much concerned about those types of investment strategies now. So anyway, I would recommend talking to a professional and making sure that you're clear before you undertake that type of a high level risk on your investments. So anyway, hopefully this makes sense, gives you some good ideas to think about. If you can focus on getting your debts under control or not getting into debts in the first place, it can allow you to build a fantastic financial plan overall.